assim, ímpar. Vocês fiquem à vontade de conversar, de perguntar, de trocar ideia. Imagina, uh, it's a great time, okay? This time with the Daft Spoel, okay? You can ask, you can put your questions in the chat. You can also try to ask him in Portuguese. Please, you can write here in the chat in Portuguese. I can help you. Don't be shy, okay? Let's go.
All right.
Yeah, Lucas,
Someone.
Lucas, I guess Lucas, okay, nice, Lucas.
Hi. Firstly, good morning. Thank you, Professor, for your lecture. I understand you're still talk more about the subject, of course, but just to make you good use of the time, as Luciano just pointed out, I'd like just to ask you about what are your or view about the development of this field in this current scenario where we are obtaining ever growing computational resources, and so functional forms, these classic functional forms based on non-polarizable Coulomb interactions and classical 12-6 Lennard-Jones interactions dominate the molecular dynamics codes because of their simplicity and computational efficiency. But since we are now gaining scale computing powers, we are not actually demanded to remain within the simple approximations anymore. And we have several approaches to go towards machine learning potentials or polarizable potentials or coupled hybrid quantum mechanical, molecular mechanical approaches. I don't know, I just wanted to add a bit about your views about this in the next few years.
Very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very, of course, it's also a very broad question and difficult to answer. I mean, it's impossible to say this is going to happen because many groups will do whatever they think is best for their applications, or and in my field, so I'm coming from like protein simulation field. There, people go to humongous systems like simulating a whole cell, but it's a bit of a contest in that sense, that who is the biggest simulation system wins, and I'm also guilty of that myself, but I gave up after a single virus, a small virus at that. So the problem with these things is if systems get larger, then also motions will become slower, and you pay for a larger system in your simulation cost, but also for the time scales, which become even longer. I mean, these particles move on really slow time scales, and so you pay like 3 times, or you pay like for the volume of your system, which is like the main thing, but then also for doing much longer simulation. So it's I think this is pretty not very meaningful. But as you allude to, there's like a whole range of methods. Of course, there will be many more machine learning methods, or like neural network potentials, like Luciano also mentioned in the beginning, and they will become more fancy and more useful for applications. And what, as always, I mean, people make really bold claims in the beginning, and then it probably turns out that okay, there were some problems with these methods here and there, and in particular for neural network potentials, the possibility of like extrapolating outside the training data set is like a real problem. And for instance, AlphaFold, which I know from because my colleagues use that for protein structure prediction based on sequence, they have this problem quite seriously, that proteins that fall outside the training set, they don't work so well. But they got the Nobel Prize anyway, so they probably are happy, and they're still developing it as well. So that will only get better, of course. But in short, I have no short answer.
Yeah, indeed, it's a I believe it's not trivial. Okay, answer that about the future. But one concern that I guess the students, okay, today, like Lucas said, and for example, after the conference here, just open my camera as well. Yeah, after the conference that we attended, and as I said, many guys shared about the machine learning potentials and so on. I listening the undergrad and also the graduate students after the conference. The main question was, okay, so what will be the future of the classical force fields? One was about that, and another concern that one, I guess, the students shared with us was uh, how, for in terms of the confidence and the truth that we can have about the machine learning potential. So uh, it's a kind of a black box, and working with the black box, what is the uh, possibility to lose or forget about the physics behind the molecules, okay, behind the phenomena. So it's this topic is a thing that we have talked a lot with the ACT development. So don't forget
Mhm.
the physics behind the models, because when we are training data or we are developing force fields based on data, so we need to take care about the physics behind, and don't forget it. Okay, I
Mhm.
guess this concern is um, being discussed in literature today, and people are trying to like develop a kind of foundation model, but
Mhm.
we don't we need to pay attention on the physics behind, and not only derive the science based on data. It's a little bit tricky, I guess. What do you think
Mhm.
about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, at one stage, once we get a bit further with our own developments, we will definitely try and take those models and compare to those. So, until now, I mean, we have compared our liquids to OPLS and GAF, those standard simple 12-6 potentials. But in the future, we will have to compare to this MACE, for instance, this foundational model that you mentioned. So we'll see what happens if you throw ethanol in maize and simulate a liquid. I have no idea whether it will be any good or not. Um, so that will be interesting, but that's for the future as well. And I think also by these kind of detailed comparisons that we will do at some stage, we will also be able to give pointers for those machine learning models to improve. Um, so I think there will be like mutual um, cross-pollination to between fields as it should be.
Yeah, yeah, of course, good.
Any more questions right now? If not, then I have more slides.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. No questions in the chat.
Good. All right, so to do this force field science, we developed the Alexandria Chemistry Toolkit, as we call it. So the idea is to derive force fields for MD simulations from quantum chemical databases based on different physical models. And the code can also do simple MD calculations or normal mode analysis and thermochemistry and calculate second virial coefficients. But the main focus of this presentation is about deriving force fields. All right, so we start by collecting quantum chemistry data and from experiments and from quantum chemistry, and store everything in something that we call the Alexandria library. Then we devise new physical models, and that's an old picture of Mohammad Karemanpour, an old graduate student who was involved in this work. We throw everything into the Alexandria Chemistry Toolkit, and out comes a force field. And then we can evaluate that. And this code is available online at GitHub, so you can download it. We are working on packaging it so that it's easier to install, but that will be in the near future. So data. We actually did a review on quantum chemistry data in JCIM a couple of years ago. There are quite a few databases, but they are not complete. For instance, they have not a lot of data on phosphor and sulfur compounds, halogens, or molecular ions. They also have relatively poor coverage of off-equilibrium structures. So say that we want to model like bond stretching, then we need to know not just the equilibrium structure, the perfect bond length, but also how the energy varies with bond stretching. And there's not so much data for that. There's also little data for electrostatic potentials, although I will come back to that. I don't think we need them. All right. Then I have to briefly introduce you to symmetry adapted perturbation theory. So what you do is a quantum chemical calculation using perturbation theory that gives us energy components. So the electrostatics, induction, dispersion, and exchange. And this is a plot that looks like this. So here you have sodium chloride as a function of distance. And the total interaction is here in purple, so it has a nice minimum. But if you then look at, for instance, the electrostatics, it becomes more attractive. It will not become attractive forever, but it goes down quite a bit. And that is compensated for by the exchange, which is repulsive everywhere. And then we have those weaker terms, the dispersion and the induction, which are also both attractive. And the idea is that we can use those terms to match the force field to the quantum chemistry. So for instance, if we want to reproduce electrostatics, then we should not look at the total energy, but only at this green curve here. And then if we can match all those terms one by one, we would get back the total interaction energy. However, this is a nice idea, but it's not so simple. So how does this work? So we collect the data from, for instance, the Alexandria library, which is now a couple of years old, although we updated it not so long ago with more data. So there's like data for around 5,000 compounds, and you can find it on Zenodo. Then we're doing symmetry adapted perturbation calculations. We have done quite a lot, and we have a repository with scripts to do your own calculations as well. Then we do massively parallel calculations to train physical models. I will come back to that in a sec. And in the end, we have to validate the models using OpenMM. So we used two main external softwares, Psi4 for doing quantum calculations, and OpenMM for doing simulations. And the beauty of OpenMM is that you can specify the potential that you want to use as a string in Python. So you just write a mathematical expression for the potential energy, and then it will calculate it and calculate the derivatives as well. Okay, sorry, I have to leave PowerPoint for a sec because it went into automatic mode. I don't know what I did. Can you still see it?
No.
Sorry about that. Try again. Okay, so how does the Alexandria Chemistry Toolkit work? So we collect the gas phase data, monomers and dimers, sub calculations for dimers, and then we train our models and then validate. And for, as I mentioned, we use Psi4 for quantum calculations and OpenMM for liquid simulations. So we have data and a model. This is what we have to start with. And of course, we can vary both the data and the model as we see, as we want. And the data consists of either these dimer interactions, which gives us the non-bonded forces, or these off-equilibrium energies. So we calculate the energy of many conformations of each molecule, where we stretch the bonds and angles and so on. And this gives us both energies and forces that we can use to train our models. And we throw everything into the Alexandria Chemistry Toolkit, and out comes a force field. And then using OpenMM, we have to validate it based on experiment, looking at gas, liquid, and solid phase properties. And then often we find that, okay, this was a nice try, but it's not good enough. So what do we have to change? And then we go back to our model and we run the whole cycle once more. So an example force field interaction function is the most trivial one, consisting of Lennard-Jones and Coulomb plus covalent harmonic bond vibrations, harmonic angle vibrations, torsional rotations as a series of cosine terms, and the total energy is just the sum of all these things. Now, if you think about this, you see that there are parameters everywhere. We have A, I, and B. We have the charges. We have this force constant and this equilibrium distance for the bonds. And some of those things, like these distances, we can actually get from experimental data. But many of those parameters are still parameters that we need to determine somehow from other data. So I estimated that for the protein force field, like amber, that we have around 1500 different parameters. Well, that's quite a lot. And also the dependence of the energy on the parameters is non-linear. So if we go back, so here we have like the cosine of the angle. So this guy, some of these are linear, but most of them, or not all of them, are linear. And especially if we replace this by an exponentials and things like that. So deriving a force field from scratch used to be difficult. However, our approach in the ACT, which is the abbreviation that we typically use for Alexandria Chemistry Toolkit, is that we can describe a force field as a genome. So a genome is just a series of nucleobases, CGT, U, in a real genome. But here we just state that we can describe a force field as a genome where we have for each atom different parameters like polarizability, distribution width, sigma for van der Waals, and so on. And then for carbon we have the same parameters. Then we have bonded parameters as well, like the bond length, dissociation energy, and so on. So we can describe the whole force field as one long string of floating point numbers. And now the idea is that if we start with n of those genes, so each line here is a gene, we can evaluate the fitness of each gene. And then we can use crossover, so breeding in principle between the genes to get a better genes. So we start with a population of n individuals, and we have like hundreds of parameters. Each of these have like a fixed range. So like if you think about van der Waals radius, we know that they vary between maybe 1.5 angstrom and 4 angstrom or something like that. So we tell the program that this is the range that's possible. And then we use a genetic algorithm that uses crossover, random mutations, and things like that to improve the genome with time, with each like new generation. And then we combine this genetic algorithm with a Monte Carlo algorithm where we take a genome without crossing it over, but by doing random small mutations to make like small local changes, where we just change this parameter, for instance, and see whether the fitness improves. And then we mix or iteratively do both genetic algorithm and Monte Carlo, and in this way we can rapidly get good genomes that reproduce the data. And then we run this on large parallel computers, as I mentioned. So we have one master process that has the whole gene pool with all the genes, and then we have like each individual or middleman, if we call it in the computational lingo. Each individual has one genome, and then the middleman calculates the fitness and sends it back to the master, who then sorts the genes to see which one has the highest fitness, and then generates new genomes that then go back to the individuals or middlemen to calculate. And then to make it faster, we can also have each middleman can have different helper computers that do part of the fitness calculation. So let's say we have a system with maybe 100 different parameters. We typically want to have 2 or 3 times that number of individuals. So we would have like 300 individuals. And then if we have many molecules to calculate, then we can, each individual can get like a couple or a handful of helper processors as well. So we would run, for instance, 300 individuals on 1200 processors, and then each individual runs on 4. And in this way, we can quite rapidly, in fact, derive a force field. And of course, you can think that this is very expensive and you need like huge computers. And yes, that's true. But the idea is that once we have a force field that's actually any good, that it will likely be used on many, many, many more processors than what is needed for the derivation of the force field. So in that respect, it's not super expensive to do this properly. Yeah, so the workflow is we collect data, and then we need many different orientations and distances, a reasonable level of theory, and then we also need these off-equilibrium monomers. Again, here we use MP2 single point calculations and some other stuff. And then we do the ACT training on dimer energies first. And once we have that, then we do an ACT training on the monomer energies, where we take the dimer or the non-bonded energies in the new calculation. So if there are non-bonded interactions in the monomers as well, we take them into account as well, and try to fit the total energy to the MP2 results. And then again, we have to validate. Okay, so let's look at some examples. So here's a water molecule, and the H2O, on top of it we have plotted in green the lone pair positions, and in blue we have sigma holes. So the lone pairs, they have extra electron density, and the sigma holes have reduced electron density. So if we think about exchange interactions, then those are thus proportional to the amount of electrons, electron density. So we expect that close to the sigma holes, that the exchange interaction is weaker, and close to the lone pairs, that it's higher. So what we can do is we can take our model and we add extra particles at the sigma hole position and at the lone pair position, and actually ACT will also calculate the positions of these things, and then see whether we can get a better description of the exchange energy. And this is what you see here. So on the x-axis we have exchange from SAPT calculations, where we took the water molecule and we had like a probe atom around the water at different positions, so we could see what the energy was, exchange energy, as a function of position of the probe. Now in blue we have a model which just exchange on the atoms. And you see you have quite large spread, RMSE of 2.5 kilojoule per mole. Now if we add orange crosses, a virtual site on the lone pair, and then this actually has a positive exchange energy, you see that the error becomes a bit smaller. If we, on the other hand, have a lone pair, not a lone pair, but a sigma hole virtual site particle, where we then have a negative exchange. So basically we reduce the exchange a little bit if our probe atom is close to the sigma hole. Then the RMSE is reduced even further. And if we have both, then we get, of course, the lowest RMSE. Of course, you should realize that by then you have a water molecule with 7 particles, so it will become more expensive. But on the other hand, your RMSE goes down a factor of 6 from 2.4 to 0.4. So by doing these things like one by one, we can simply show how much each of these improvements, if you will, extra particles helps to better describe the energies. So then we also did we have submitted a paper on oh no, this is actually already published, sorry, where we looked again at alkali halide ions, but now we do not use the Gaussian charges on the point, but on the nuclear core, but we use a point charge on the core and a negative Gaussian charge. And then we compare our models to SAPT, symmetry adapted perturbation theory, and to the Waltz et al. Model that I described before the break. And here we plot the difference in electrostatic energy between each of these models. So and also SAPT respectively with respect to point charges. So let's have a look at these graphs. So the 0 line, which is not plotted here, would be like the interaction between 2 point charges. And you see that the blue line SAPT for lithium chloride and lithium bromide lies quite a bit above the point charges. So actually the interaction between the two ions for these guys is actually weaker than the interaction between 2 point charges. Obviously the point charges attract each other, plus and minus, but here you see that the SAPT calculations tell us that the interaction between these ions is actually quite a bit weaker than between 2 point charges, and the gray line is where the minimum in the energy is. So you see at the minimum energy position, this is roughly 30 kilojoules per mole weaker than the point charge. And for lithium bromide, it is similar. And you see that in this case that the Waltz et al. Model is a bit off, not a whole lot off, and our ACT model is much closer to SAPT because it was trained on that as well, of course. But the interesting thing starts with sodium chloride and sodium bromide. So you see here actually the interaction between the ions is much stronger than between 2 point charges. In this way We can model that with our ACT models, but the Waltz et al. Model actually has it not only quantitatively but also qualitatively wrong. So this is quite interesting that we can, by simply changing this one particle from a Gaussian to a point charge, we can get much better results. And we did actually look into this as well at the time that we did the Waltz model, but for some reason we moved away from that again. I don't recall exactly why. So the Waltz model is not only quantitatively but also qualitatively wrong. So this is quite interesting, and this was published this spring. And here are some statistics for these models, and basically for all these 9 ion pairs that we tested, the Waltz model is even actually, it's not as good as the point charge. And our ACT models are like 10 times lower RMSD. Now, I don't want to bash my own model too much because actually this is way off, but this model relies, like all classical models, on error compensation. So if the electrostatics is too high, then you make the exchange compensate for that. And this is what we did. So the total interaction by the Waltz model is actually pretty good because we have too high electrostatics, then we compensate that by lower exchange. But we didn't do that consciously when we made those models. So this error compensation is like a feature in all models, basically. All those standard models that people use for doing MD simulations of proteins and things like that. But now that we know more about these things and we have better data to compare to, we can actually try to go further. And this is a paper that we have just submitted a couple of weeks ago, where we try to look into proteins. And so we have a couple of proteins here, and what they all share is that they have strong interactions with, again, inorganic ions, or water, of course. And so what we set out to do here is to make a model for charged side chain analogs. So the groups like glutamate, aspartate, arginine, lysine, histidine, that interact strongly with those ions. In total, we made sub-calculations for 94 of those molecules or dimers, and we also did other calculations, but then we did a total of like 14,000 sub-calculations at a pretty high level, and then try to evaluate these models. So we compare to a number of popular models like Mulliken and Hirschfeld, which are well known. People will not use these anymore because they are known not to be great. But people do use electrostatic potential fitting extensively to generate charges, for instance. And we also compare to the minimal basis iterative Stockholder, which is a quite recent partitioning algorithm, which is relatively popular. And then we compare that to our own ACT trained models, again with the point charge core and polarizable or non-polarizable Gaussian shells. So let me just spend a couple minutes trying to argue why ESP fitting of charges is flawed. So the electrostatic potential follows from the quantum mechanical charge distribution. So we have a charge distribution centered around, or we want to measure the potential, electrostatic potential at position I, then we have to integrate the total charge distribution over all space. And it's possible to fit molecular mechanics charges to reproduce this. So we just minimize these the difference between these two expressions with respect to Q, and we get charges that best reproduce this. However, the information in this quantum mechanical electrostatic potential is incomplete, since typically we only sample a part of the space. So typically we sample the grid points close to a molecule, and then based on that we try to do this fitting. However, the Poisson equation is local in space, so we can calculate the electrostatic potential from the charge distribution, but the other way around is not possible, because the math of this equation basically tells us that we can derive the psi from the charge distribution, but not the other way around, because it's only around this position where we actually have data that we can get any information. And to predict interaction energies, we need to know the charge distributions everywhere. So if we want to have a molecular mechanics charge distribution, in particular when it's not point charges, then we have to know them everywhere in space to be able to calculate the electrostatic energy. So this means that in particular for if you start using like Gaussian charge distributions, you need to know like the exact distributions to be able to calculate these energies. And if you get an approximate charge distribution out, then you will have an error in your energy as well, which is difficult to predict beforehand. So this is the systems that we use: charge sidechain analogs, water and ions. And then if we just look at the statistics, so these are then electrostatic potential based model, so charges that come straight from Gaussian, for instance, the Gaussian program, I mean. For our data set of like 9,000 training and 5,000 testing, and you see that the error is like pretty large, 17 kilojoule per mole in interaction energy, electrostatic interaction energy, I should say. Now, if you use this minimal basis iterative Stockholder algorithm, then errors are a bit lower, but then we have this model includes a point charge and a Slater charge. So it is also a positive charge and a negative charge, and this is a distributed negative charge. So this is the same kind of model that we do in these models here, where we also have a point charge and a Gaussian. But if we train it on SAPT, then we get an error which is like 4 times lower versus if we look only at the monomers.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
I had an issue here, if I understood well, please. Could you clarify a thing? You said that you calculated many timers with the ions and some residues, okay, from the amino acids, okay. And then, of course, I guess this was calculated in gas phase, isolated gas phase. But my question is, how did you choose, for example, the orientations between the dimers? Because you know the amino acid residues are large than an ion now, and then you need to put the positive or negative ions, okay, around the residue. So it should be, I guess, in terms explore many different, okay, positions around the residues. So can you explain a little
that's
bit
correct,
more
yeah.
about the choice that you had?
this is a difficult to solve like in a general way. So we did a combination of like random orientations and also close to minimum. So we minimized some of those all those dimers in a simple force field. And I think also in B3lib or something in a simple quantum chemical way. And then we sampled structures around close to the minimum. But then we also have random things. But it's not certain that we have sampled everything good enough. So this is just an open question that we are working on.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we see here is that the electrostatics is quite a bit better if we train the model on the dimers. So I think the simple take-home message is that if you're interested in interactions, then it makes sense to train a model on interactions and not on monomers and hope for the best. So if you start from monomers, you can get like really good, very low, very good models to reproduce the electrostatic potential, but there's no guarantee that it will give you a good interactions. So if you are interested in the interactions, then train on the interactions. Yeah, and then I mean I think I will try and round off, but we have some scripts to visualize. And for instance, here we have all the dimers in the system. So these are symmetric matrices, and then you can see which one are better or worse than others. And you see that the ESP fitted ones are, for instance, formate. Negative ions are a problem for ESP fitting due to those properties of negative ions that have a positive core are poorly modeled. And this gets a bit better when you have this point charge insulator, but with our models it gets even better. And then here we have mixtures of alcohol and water, and we trained complete force fields for alcohol and water at targeting either subbed energies or OPLS energies. So OPLS is a force field which we know performs very well for alcohol and water. So we can play with our ACT to give it a different kind of target in the training, and then we can see that in most cases are the OPLS. So now we're looking at Coulomb, dispersion, exchange, and total energy. We see that OPLS is actually slightly worse at the energy components than our model, which is the BC, but OPLS is better at the total energy. And now this is when we were training our model on subbed energies and then comparing OPLS to the same data. But now if we train our model on the OPLS energies, we can actually get pretty close. And here is actually one of the few examples so far where we have gone all the way to simulating liquids. So here you see for ethanol and propanol mixtures as where we have ethanol water and propanol water as a function of water concentration. And you see that the blue dots are experiments and OPLS is like very close. And one of our models that was trained to OPLS data is also pretty close. And here are our models trained on subbed, which are, well, they are basically overestimating the density of especially the alcohol phase. So there's still more work to do, but there's not many groups that have actually tried to model liquid from scratch based on quantum chemistry calculations. I will skip this in view of time. I will have couple more slides about hydrogen halides. So hydrogen halides are interesting. So we have hydrogen fluoride, chloride, bromide, iodide. And many models have been made for these compounds, in particular hydrogen fluoride, where we have the hydrogen and the halide halogen atom and a virtual site with a negative charge in between. Could be the sum, or it could be equal to have the same charges on H and X, and then this like twice that, or you can have 3 different charges. And then this position can be inside or outside. And in particular for larger atoms, chloride, bromide, iodide, it makes sense to have a positive charge here to model the sigma hole that is around there. And then we tried this with 3 different van der Waals potentials. We have with or without exchange correction or van der Waals on the virtual site, models with either just point charges or this point charge plus Gaussian charge. So we have 3 times 3 times 2 different force fields. So we have 18 different force fields. And then we train them in different ways as well. Now, this is lots of information, but 18 models, 3 training strategies, and then we did 5 independent trainings for each. So this is force field science in my this definition anyway. Many different models, and then compare the results. And unfortunately, this then leads to monster tables. But what we see is that if we train the model on electrostatic interactions first, we get very low RMSD from Coulomb. But if we want to have low RMSD for the total energy, we have to train on the total energy. So if we do that, then we allow again Coulomb and exchange in particular to compensate for each other. So let me just give you a brief summary. So adding the Gaussian jar V side makes Coulomb a lot better. Then we can add an extra exchange correction like we did for water to the ions. It makes exchange a lot better. So that is going from, let's have a look here, 3.3 or 2.2. If we then add this exchange correction term, it goes to 1.3. And the same here for the 14.7 potential. It goes from 2.1 to 1.3. And this is something I'm looking into. But here we can again see that Leonard Jones 12.6 has a higher RMSD than Wang Buckingham. So here we have like 1.9 is the best here, or 1.7. And for this one is 1.3 for Wang Buckingham, and 14.7 is even a bit better at 1.1. This is also that this is the cheapest, and this is in between, and this is the most expensive potential. So you want to play, you got to pay, basically. Okay, to round off, the ACT can derive force fields based on QM datasets, based on user-defined physical models. It can perform simple force field calculations. The paper was published. It is open source, and there's even a manual. And with our applications, we have shown that electrostatics and exchange, we can get detailed information about it that we can use to improve models systematically. And these are some of the people that worked on this, and some of the organizations that sponsored our work. And then there are, of course, many collaborators as well. So thank you all for your attention. It was a long session. I'm sorry for that. I thought I would be quicker, but here we go.